Welcome dear audience, students and scholars. Here I'm Dr. Amjad Ali. In this video we are going to discuss accounting for the sources of economic growth. Dear scholars, real GDP in the United States has grown an average of about 3% per year over the past 50 years. What explains this growth? In classical model we link the output of the economy to the factors of production, capital and labor, and to the production technology. Here we develop a technique called growth accounting that divide the growth in output into three different sources: increases in capital, increases in labor, and advances in technology. This breakdown provides us as a measure of a rate of change in technological progress. Okay, increases in the factors of production. First, examine how increases in the factors of production contribute to increases in output. Okay, to do this, to start by assuming there is no technological change, so the production function relating output Y to capital K and labor L is constant over time. So we have Y is equal to function of capital and labor. In this case, the amount of output Y changes only because of change in amount of capital or change in amount of labor. Okay, increases in capital. First, consider changes in capital. If the amount of capital increases by delta K units, by how much does the amount of output increases? Okay, to answer this question, we need to recall the definition of the marginal product of capital MPK. So we have MPK is equal to function of K plus 1 L minus function of K and L. The marginal product of capital tells us how much output increases when capital increases by 1 unit. Therefore, when capital increases by delta K unit, output increases by approximately MPK cross delta K. For example, suppose that marginal product of capital is 1 over 5, that is an additional unit of capital increases the amount of output produced by 1/5 of a unit. Okay, if we increase the amount of output of capital by 10 units, we can compute the amount of additional output as follow. We have delta Y is equal to MPK cross delta K. Okay, then we have delta Y is equal to 1 over 5 units of output divided by units of capital cross 10 units of capital. Then we have delta Y is equal to 2 units of output. So this shows that by increasing capital by 10 units, we obtain 2 units of more output. Thus, we can use the marginal product of capital to convert changes in capital into changes in output. Okay, increases in labor. Next, consider changes in labor. If the amount of labor increased by delta L units, by how much does the output increase? Okay, to answer this question the same way when answered the question about capital, the marginal product of capital MPL tells us how much output changes when labor increases by 1 unit, that is we have MPL is equal to function of K and L plus 1 minus function of K and L. Therefore, when the amount of labor increases by delta L unit, output increases by approximately MPL cross delta L. Okay, for example, suppose that marginal product of labor is 2, that is an additional unit of labor increases the amount of output produced by 2 units. Okay, if to increase the amount of labor by 10 units, this can compute the amount of additional output as follow: delta Y is equal to MPL cross delta L. So delta Y is equal to 2 units of output divided by units of labor cross 10 units of labor. So we get delta Y is equal to 20 units of output. This reveals that by increasing labor by 10 units, we obtain 20 more units of output here. Thus, we use the marginal product of labor to convert changes in labor into changes in output. Okay, increases in capital and labor. Finally, let's consider the more realistic case in which both factors of production change. Suppose that amount of capital increases by delta K and amount of labor increases by delta L. The increase in output then comes from two sources. The first one is more capital and more labor. Okay, then by dividing this increase into the total sources using the marginal products of the two inputs, we get delta Y is equal to MPK cross delta K plus MPL cross delta L. The first term here represents the increase in output resulting from the increase in capital, and the second term represents the increase in output resulting from the increase in labor. This equation shows us how to attribute growth to each factor of production. Okay, now convert this last equation into a form that is easier to interpret and apply to available data. First, with some algebraic rearrangement, the equation becomes as we have delta Y over Y is equal to MPK cross K divided by Y, and we have delta K over K plus MPL cross L divided by Y, and we have delta L over L. This form of equation relates the growth rate of output delta Y over Y to the growth of or you can say that the growth rate of capital delta K over K and the growth rate of labor delta L over L. Now we need to find out some way to measure the terms of each part of this equation. In the classical model, we showed that the marginal product of capital equals its real rental price. So therefore, MPK cross K is the total return to capital, and MPK cross K over Y is capital shares of output. Okay, similarly, the marginal product of capital equals the real wage. Therefore, MPL cross L is the total compensation that labor receives, and MPL cross L over Y is labor's share of output. Okay, under the assumption that production function has constant return to scale, Euler's theorem tells us that these two shares sum to 1. In this case, it can be written as delta Y over Y is equal to alpha delta K over K plus 1 minus alpha delta L over L. Here, alpha is the capital shares and 1 minus alpha is labor shares. This equation gives us a simple formula for showing how changes in output occur due to changes in input. It shows in particular that we might weight the growth rate of output by the growth rate of inputs of factors share. Okay, capital share in the United States is about 30%, that is alpha is equal to 0.30. 3. Therefore, a 10% increase in amount of capital delta K over K is equal to 0.10 leads to a 3% increase in amount of output, that is delta Y over Y is equal to 0.03. Okay, similarly, a 10% increase in the amount of labor delta L over L is equal to 0.10 leads to a 7% increase in amount of output, that is delta Y over Y is equal to 0.07. Okay, technological process. So far in our analysis of sources of growth, we have been assuming that production function does not change over time in practice. Of course, technological progress improves the production function for any given amount of inputs. We can produce more output today than we could have in the past. We know extend the analysis to allow for technological progress. Uh, okay, include the effects of changing technology by writing the production function as we have y is equal to a fkl. Okay, here A is a measure of a current level of technology called the total factor productivity. Output, here output no increases not only because of increase in capital and labor, but also because of increase in total factor productivity. If total factor productivity increases by 1% and if the inputs are unchanged, then output increases by 1%. Okay, allowing for a changing level of technology adds another term to our equation accounting for economic growth, that is delta y over y is equal to alpha delta k over k plus 1 minus alpha delta L over L plus delta A over A. So this reveals that growth in output is equal to contribution of capital, contribution of labor plus contribution of total factor productivity. This is the key equation of growth accounting. It identifies and allows us to measure the three sources of growth, that is change in amount of capital, changes in amount of labor, and changes in total factor productivity. Because total factor productivity is not directly observable, it is measured indirectly. We have data on growth in output, capital and labor. We also have data on capital shares of output. From these data and the growth accounting equation, we can compute the growth in total factor productivity to make sure that everything adds up. So we have delta A over A is equal to delta y over y minus alpha delta k over k minus 1 minus alpha delta L over L. So here delta A over A is the change in output that cannot be explained by changes in inputs. Thus, the growth in total factor productivity is computed as a residual, that is the amount of output growth that remains after we have accounted for the determinants of growth that we measure directly. Indeed, delta A over A is sometimes called the Solo Residual after Robert Solow, who first showed how to compute it. Okay, reasons in change total factor productivity. Total factor productivity can change for many reasons. Changes must often arise because of increase in knowledge about the production methods. So the Solo residual is often used as a measure of technological progress. Yet other factors such as education and government regulation can affect total factor productivity as well. For example, if higher public spending raises the quality of education, then workers may become more productive and output may rise, which implies a higher total factor productivity. Another example, if government regulation requires firms to purchase capital to produce or to reduce pollution or increase worker safety, then the capital stock may rise without any increase in measured output, which implies lower total factor productivity. Total factor productivity captures anything that changes the relation between measured inputs and measured output. Okay, the sources of growth in the United States, having learned how to measure the sources of economic growth, now look at data in case of US. We have accounting for economic growth in the United States here. So here we have some empirical data. This table uses the data on US to measure the contribution of three sources of growth between 1948 to 2007. So see here we have three sources: capital, labor, and total factor productivity. This table shows that output in non-farm business sector grew at an average of 3.6% per year during this time. Of this 3.6%, 1.2% was attributable to increase in capital and 1.2% is due to changes in labor and 1.2% is to increase in total factor productivity. These data show that increases in capital, labor and productivity have contributed to almost equally to economic growth in the United States. This figure or this data also shows that growth in total factor productivity showed a slowdown during the period from 1972 to 1995. So see here we have the slowdown in total factor productivity. In case we have improved so total factor productivity during 1995 to 2007. So see here we have increased level of total factor productivity. Okay, we have to discuss a case study that growth in the East Asian tigers, perhaps the most spectacular growth experience in recent history have been those of the tigers of East Asia, Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea and Taiwan from 1966 to 1990. While real income per person was growing about 2% per year in the United States, it grew more than 7% per year in each of these countries. In the case of a single generation, the real income per person increased fivefold, moving the tiger from among the world's poorest country to among the richest countries. Okay, what accounts for these growth miracles is one of the main questions here. Some commentators have argued that success of these four countries is hard to reconcile with basic growth theory such as the Solow growth model, which takes the technology as growing at a constant rate, exogenous rate. Okay, they have suggested that these countries' rapid growth is explained by their ability to imitate foreign technology by opting technology developed abroad. The argument goes these countries manage to improve their production function substantially in a relatively short period of time. If this argument is correct, these countries should have experienced usually rapid growth in total factor productivity. Okay, one study shed light on this issue by explaining in detail the data from these four countries. The study found that their exceptional growth can be traced to a large increase in measured factor inputs, increases in labor force participation, increases in the capital stock, and increases in educational attainment. In South Korea, for example, the investment GDP ratio rose from about 5% in 1950s and about 30% in 1980s. The percentage of working population with at least a high school education went from 26% in 1966 to 75% in 1991. Once we account for the growth in labor capital and human capital, little of the growth in output is left to explain. None of these four countries experience unusual rapid growth in total factor productivity. Indeed, the average growth in total factor productivity in the East Asian tigers was almost exactly the same as in the United States. Thus, although these countries' rapid growth have been truly impressive, it is easy to explain using the tools of basic growth model. The Solo residual in the short run. When Robert Solow introduced his famous residual, his aim was to shed light on the forces that determine technological progress and economic growth in the long run. But economists like Edward Prescott was looked at the Solo residual as a measure of technological change over shorter periods of time. He concluded that the fluctuation in technology are a major source of short-run changes in growth or economic activity. So let's see a graphical presentation how Prescott or Solow highlighted the technological changes, or we can say the total factor productivity. Okay, this figure shows that the Solo residual in the growth in the total output using annual data for the US case during from 1970 to 2007. Notice that the Solo residual fluctuates substantially. If Prescott's interpretation is correct, then we can draw conclusion from these short-run fluctuation as that technology worsened in 80s. So see here we have worsened technology in 1982 and improved technology in 1984. Notice that the Solo residual move closely with output in years. When output falls, technology tends to worsen. In Prescott's view, this fact implies that recessions are driven by adverse shocks in technology. The hypothesis that technological shocks are driving forces behind short-run economic fluctuation, and contemporary hypothesis that monetary policy has no role in explaining these fluctuations is the foundation for an approach called real business cycle theory. Prescott's interpretation of these data is controversial. However, many economists believe that Solo residual does not accurately represent changes in technology over short periods of time. The standard explanation of cyclical behavior of the Solo residual is that it results from two measurement problems. That is, first, during recession, firms may continue to employ workers they do not need so that they will have these workers on hand when economy recover. This phenomena called labor hoarding means that labor input is overestimated in a recession because the hoarded workers or laborers are probably not working as hard as usual. As a result, the Solo Residual is more cyclical than the available production technology. In a recession, productivity as a measured by the Solo Residual falls even if technology has not changed, simply because harder workers or laborers are sitting around waiting for the recession to end. Second, when demand is low, firm may produce things that are not easily measured. In recession, workers may clean the factory, organize the inventory, get some training, and do other useful tasks that standard measures of output fail to include. If so, then output is underestimated in recession, which would also make the measured Solo residuals cyclical fluctuation for reason other than technology. Thus, economists can interpret the cyclical behavior of the Solo residual in different ways. Some economists point to the low productivity in recession as evidence for a diverse technological shock. Others believe that measured productivity is low in a recession because workers are not working as hard as usual and because more of their output is not measured. Unfortunately, there is no clear evidence on the importance of labor hoarding and cyclical mismeasurement of output. So this is all about accounting for the sources of economic growth and Solo residual. So see you with another video. Ciao.